Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this, the penultimate meeting of our quadrennial term. I'm sure you'll all understand what that means. I want to welcome all the people in the gallery, all of the public joining us via live stream, the media, and of course the public here in the gallery, and councillors and staff. We're going to have Councillor Natoli provide the acknowledgement for traditional custodians, so if I could ask the chamber to be upstanding, please. Thanks, Councillor Natoli.
Good morning, Mr Mayor and all councillors. The Sunshine Coast acknowledges the Kabi Kabi peoples and the Jinnabara peoples, whose lands and waters we all now share. Traditional owners' unique values and ancient and enduring cultures deepen and enrich the life of our communities. The Sunshine Coast has been a place of celebration, abundance, connection and kingship for thousands of years, and we commit to working in partnership with the traditional owners to continue these practices and support self-determination through economic and community development. Truth-telling is a significant part of our journey, and legacy issues resulting from colonisation are still experienced by traditional owners and First Nations people. We are committed to better understanding the collective history of the Sunshine Coast traditional owners and experiences of First Nations people. We recognise our shared history and will continue to work in partnership to provide a foundation for building a shared future with the Kabi Kabi people and the Jinnabara people. We pay our respects to the traditional owners of the Sunshine Coast, to their elders, past and present, and acknowledge the important role First Nations people continue to play within the Sunshine Coast community. Together, we are all stronger. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Natoli. Please remain upstanding as I invite Commissioner James Condon from the Salvation Army to read the prayer. Thank you, James.
Thank you for the privilege of leading you in prayer this morning. And I want to just read a couple of verses, which is really the context of the prayer, from Philippians chapter 2. Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to his own interest, but also the interest of others. Almighty God, Father, Son and Holy Spirit, we acknowledge you today. Thank you for the privilege of serving the community of the Sunshine Coast. Thank you for the privilege of being the people's representatives. Thank you that you are Creator God, and we live on the doorstep of some of the most beautiful creation you ever made. God, I want to thank you today for the Mayor and the councillors who conclude their service shortly. Thank you for what they have given. Thank you for what they have done. Thank you for who they are. I pray your blessing on the council deliberations today. Grant them wisdom. May they be faithful stewards, not only of finances, but of all the resources that are given to them. People, programs, initiatives. Help them in all decisions by granting them the wisdom they need. And may your blessing be on the people, the community of the Sunshine Coast, and all those who work in the interest of others. Thank you for the great example, Jesus Christ, who loved the whole world and always saw good in people and worked for the betterment of others, not only for now, but for the future. May we follow in his example. I pray this prayer in his name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thanks very much, James. Much appreciated. Please be seated. Councillors, I'd like to acknowledge one of our own today in the shape of Councillor Winston Johnston, OAM. And I want to acknowledge and congratulate Councillor Johnston on being awarded the Medal of the Order of Australia in the 2024 Australia Day Honours List. Councillor Johnston was recognised for his service to local government and to the community of the Sunshine Coast, including his time as councillor with the current state Sunshine Coast Council and former Caloundra City Council, as well as his roles with the Maloney Show Society, Maloney Blackall Range Lions Club, and other roles he has held with local community and business groups. On behalf of my fellow councillors and Sunshine Coast Council and the community, I want to congratulate Councillor Johnson on receiving this award and the great reflection it has on our broader community. Thanks, Councillor Johnson, and well done. Round of applause, please. Councillors, we have unfortunately, we are recognising the passing of some former council employees today, and I'm going to pass over to the CEO. Thank you.
Good morning. Thanks, Mr Mayor, and good morning, councillors. Today I would like to remember the two long-serving members of Sunshine Coast Council, Gary Eshman and Marcus Helen, who sadly passed away. Gary worked in local government for 42 years, including 26 years with Sunshine Coast Council and Maroochy Shire Council. Since commencing the management of Council's holiday parks in 2000, Gary led the business from what could probably be best described as having opportunities for improvement to what it is today. Since 2000, the business has increased its annual revenue from just $3.5 million to over $20 million per annum. Aside from the financial outcomes for Council and the wider community, our holiday parks have an exemplary reputation within the industry, and that's attributed to Gary's oversight and the excellent relationships developed with Council's contract managers of the 6 holiday parks, which continues today. One of Council's holiday park managers remembers Gary as the most genuine, patient man who always provided support regardless of what was thrown at him. She said, "We have been very blessed to have known Gary and for what he taught us, and we now have a line of, what would Gary do?" Gary will be remembered for what he did, but more importantly, he will be remembered for how he did it, by remembering and living Council's values. Marcus worked for Council for 16 years and will be profoundly missed. Marcus was a great ambassador for our organisation's sustainability, often speaking to the opportunities to improve our environmental footprint, encouraging the planting of more trees, and keeping our local parks and reserves looking great. He turned up to work with a positive attitude and often told a good joke or a story. He brought passion and enthusiasm to work every day and always wanted to be there and care for his mates. At this sad time, we extend our deepest condolences to Marcus's and Gary's family, friends and colleagues.
Thank you, Emma. Please be upstanding as we observe a moment's silence. Thank you. Please be seated. We've got a full contingent today. There are no absences. The item 4 is the receipt and confirmation of the minutes from the ordinary meeting held on the 18th of January 2024. Councillor Babarowski, happy to move. Councillor Dixon, happy to second. All those in favour of receipt? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. There is no mayoral minute. Item 6 refers to any conflicts of interest, and I'd remind councillors of the requirements of the Local Government Act 2009, which sets out how councillors' conflicts of interest are managed in local government matters. These requirements apply to how we'll deal with such matters in today's meeting. Should you have a conflict, please raise it prior to the item being addressed. There are no presentations or councillors' reports, so we'll go straight to item 8.1, which is the quarterly progress report, and invite Mr Matheson to introduce.
Through the Mayor, good morning, councillors. The agenda item before you at item 8.1 is the quarterly progress report representing the performance of council in the delivery of its operational plan for the 1 October to 31 December 2023 quarter. There is a statutory requirement, as you're aware, under section 174, subsection 3 of the Local Government Regulation, to present a quarterly progress report to council in relation to performance against the operational plan. Hence, that's why the report's before you today, notwithstanding the fact that council is now operating under the caretaker arrangements. Council also needs to comply with the statutory obligations that exist within both the Act and the regulation. Hence, that's why the matter is on the agenda for today. I'll pass over in a moment to the Chief Executive Officer to provide an overview of performance, just in terms of a quick summary against the operational plan. I would just note that 94% of the, or rather 82 of the 87 deliverables in the operational plan for 2023-24 are on time and on budget, and I'll now pass over to the Chief Executive Officer for her presentation.
Thank you, Craig. Through you, Mr Mayor. I feel like in quarter two we've actually delivered a whole year's worth of stuff. It's been so busy. We've had a really big pace going for quarter two, and we've delivered a lot of things that this council had set in its agenda for the year ahead. It's always a busy time of year as we progress our activities, and as you are all well aware, it's a time where we welcome a lot of visitors to our region as well, and so the operational pace is quite high. It's very important to our council and our community that our region remains welcoming and that our facilities and spaces are inclusive and can be enjoyed by all. And to that point, in November, Council adopted Sunshine Coast All Abilities Action Plan, which outlines the detailed actions Council will undertake over the next 5 years to improve inclusion for people with a disability. This plan builds on the important work already undertaken by Council and will focus on priority areas for action, including awareness and education, built environment and public spaces, employment and training, events, programs, participation and communication. As we look to the future, it's crucial to Council that our long-term regional strategies and implementation plans are relevant and reflect our community's needs and values. In October, the refreshed Environment and Livability Strategy and the Regional Economic Development Strategy were adopted by Council. These strategies will strengthen the strategic foundation already established and continue to provide clear directions and outcomes for our region. Similarly, our corporate plan 2024 to 2028 was adopted in December, and to remain consistent with our 3 regional strategies. This plan will effectively guide Council's annual operational plan and budget for the 24-25 financial year. Another strategy of significance for our region is the Sunshine Coast Resource Recovery Strategy, which was adopted in November. With this strategy, Council will align with Commonwealth and state waste reduction targets and demonstrate our leadership towards a cleaner, greener, more sustainable future. Our goal is that by 2041, nothing ends up in landfill. Helping drive this repurposing revolution is our new $40 million material recovery facility in Nambour, which became operational in December, and I know a lot of you were present for that opening. With industry-leading intelligent sorting technology, this type of recycling plant will be able to recover glass bottles, plastic containers, cardboard, paper, steel and aluminium cans to supply a range of quality products for reuse across several industries. This facility provides essential infrastructure to support our region's transition to a circular economy for managing waste. During the quarter, there were 2 more important community facilities delivered. Altitude 9, Council's newest premium venue for hire, located on level 9 of our Sunshine Coast City Hall, with panoramic views and catering for up to 180 people. And the new 8-storey Park and Go facility, located at 4 Lightning Lane, just behind me here, accommodating almost 300 car parking spaces, 6 accessible parking spaces, 39 motorcycle spaces, and also, for the first time in our region, catering for 28 bikes with end-of-trip facilities. Both of these facilities add to the city centre and will provide great outcomes for our community. Finally, I would like to make special mention of our customer contact team, who were awarded the Customer Service Team of the Year, medium, 20 to 100 staff, at the Customer Service Institute of Australia Service Excellence Awards. Last financial year, the team responded to 260,000 contacts with an overall satisfaction rating of 4.4 out of 5 for ease of business with Council. This is such an important service for our community and well-deserved recognition for the work across Council to put our customers at the centre of everything we do. It's been a big quarter, as I said at the beginning. I always say thanks to the incredible amount of people in Council who produce these results all the time. We have 2,000 people who every day get out of bed to serve our community. That is our mission and what we do here. So thank you to everyone who's provided the results for this quarter. As I explained to you, councillors, that we won't have the group executives coming up to talk to their groups this time, but I've put this forward as a fantastic report for this quarter. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Someone to move? Councillor Hungerford, thank you. Seconder, Councillor Johnston, thank you. Would you like to open, Councillor Hungerford?
With pleasure, Mr Mayor. And as the CEO has said, there's so much and it's only a quarter. First one I'm really proud of is we've got our 15th unmodified audit in a row. Clear bill of health by the Queensland Audit Office. There's those out there trying to make out we've got financial problems and we're not a well-managed council. Nothing could be further from the truth. 15 unmodified audits in a row, and Queensland Treasury has us with the highest credit rating that can be given. Strong with neutral rating. That doesn't happen by accident, that's sound financial management. And we definitely need to keep that going in the future. 62% of Council's total available purchasing spend went to local businesses this quarter, representing an amount of $89.2 million, investing in our businesses, investing in our area. 6 awards were received for the quarter in recognition of Council's projects, programs and employees. In addition to Council's customer contact team winning the Customer Service Team of the Year. We also received awards for the Park Smart program, On-Street Excellence in Technology and Innovation. The Vitamin SC campaign, a video series aimed at promoting the Sunshine Coast as a place to do business. We're supporting our businesses by investing in them as well. Our own Sunshine Coast City Hall has won the Excellence Award for projects over $20 million. There's those that even rubbish this. It's incredible. And Council awarded 428 community grants with an allocation of more than $1.3 million. That's an increase of 15 additional grants compared to the previous quarter. Investing in our community, investing in our community groups. The Sunshine Coast Solar Farm is offset and improved to 107% of Council's total electricity consumption during the quarter. I remember the figures from when we first did this. It was over $9–10 million we were paying out for electricity every year. That's it. That money can be invested back in the community. You can see the things we're investing in. That's the results of sound management. A further 1,683 megawatt hours of power were generated from converting waste to electricity at the Caloundra Renewable Waste Facility. In addition, a reduction of 30,105 tonnes of greenhouse gas emissions were saved. That's our environmental credentials. We don't just talk about it, we're doing it. And $1.6 million was invested to rehabilitate and resurface 26 kilometres of local roads. We're one of the largest of what councils are doing in Queensland, and we're doing it sustainably and keeping our budgets in positive operating result, not deficit. State and Commonwealth governments could take a leaf out of that book. 5,872 hectares of landscape and garden beds are maintained. And with these difficult weather conditions, we're still struggling to keep up with our parks. But there's no use putting heavy machinery on them, ruining our parks. We've got to wait till the weather's right so that we actually end up with a quality result. Otherwise, we cost ourselves by trying to mow in wet conditions. And 3,075 Sunshine Coast businesses assess specialist advice, information, workshops, events that support economic development of our region, building our business base. I could go on and report in here, I could stand here for another hour. Another excellent result. We can all be proud of it, and our community can as well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hungerford.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. This will probably be my last opportunity to speak to a quarterly report, so I'm taking the opportunity. Firstly, I'll just put on record that I'm not exactly a huge fan of the new format for this particular council meeting. I understand that we're in caretaker period and decision was made not to involve our group executives who do a fantastic job. So I am a little bit disappointed that they aren't getting the opportunity to present all the wonderful things that their branches have delivered for our Sunshine Coast community. So yeah, I'm a little bit disappointed about that. But in saying that, I just wanted to touch on a couple of things which are probably portfolio related. And so I know that the CEO touched on the material resource recovery facility up at Bly that was opened. I think that was in late November, early December. Wonderful facility. It goes a long way to meeting our sort of state government diversion targets. We're trying to reduce, obviously, the amount of landfill or material that goes to landfill. So that's a wonderful facility, and it was great to see so many of the councillors there going through and doing the tour of that wonderful new facility. I also just wanted to touch on page 31, there was talk about the Caloundra Community and Creative Hub. And obviously the former admin building is going through a bit of a repurposing at the moment. And I know that over the years I've been very supportive of council in the CBD here and City Hall, because I knew that Caloundra was next in line for that investment of ratepayer funds. It really needed that public investment to go into Caloundra, and I'm just so excited to see. I had a tour with Councillor Landsberg, and I know the Mayor's obviously had a tour of the facility as well that's now under construction. That is going to be a great piece of infrastructure, public infrastructure for our community to enjoy. So I've been very supportive of City Hall because I knew Caloundra's time was going to be next, as well as, you know, further investment into the Nambour precinct. And just lastly, I wanted to also touch on something that the CEO raised. We've got about 2,000 staff here that work with council, and as the CEO mentioned, they get up out of bed every day and do their best for the Sunshine Coast community. So I just wanted to give them acknowledgement for their dedication, their passion and their service, because we have some amazing people working in council, and they're probably going to be one of the things I miss most. So anyway, I'll be supporting this here today.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Councillor Babrowski.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, I thought again, in my role as portfolios, which I've really considered a privilege now for 3 terms on basically transport and 2 terms on arts and heritage, I wanted to acknowledge that this quarter did include the reports on the new arts and heritage levy and the transport levy. I wanted to firstly thank the community for really having the maturity to accept these levies, to give the resources to these programs. But I also wanted to thank my colleagues, councillors and the executive, for also recognising that we needed to take the political step of having levies for these programs. But let's remind ourselves that the arts can get edged out in times of particular stress. It's sometimes seen as the nice to have, but it is in fact the R&D of what it is to be human. It actually helps us define what it is to be human. So I really want to recognise that the arts program that we reported on in this quarter helped to employ 350 artists. 350, that sounds like a big number, but when you think we're 360,000, it's a relatively small number, but a super important one. So long may that continue. And we have grown that from a base of 0 in 3 terms. In terms of the heritage program, again, I think with the rate of change that people are experiencing, they really do get unbalanced without some sense of anchors. And many of those anchors, not all by any means, some of those anchors come from a deeper understanding of what our history is and where we've come from. And that's where our heritage program, again, needs the resources to provide, in this case, 133 different events and program items, 133. So that's an opportunity for many people to get some sort of perspective on where we are by understanding from where we've come. So I again, like to acknowledge that this council shows great maturity in having those levies, and I sincerely hope that that maturity is continued into the future. Bankford House was a really quite important acquisition for this council some decade ago, more than that, 15 years ago it must have been. But we've developed what was essentially a home that had been snap frozen by the various families that have lived there into a visitation centre, which now has over 4,300 visitors. That's not, again, a very big number, but it's a massively big increase now that council have been operating that for some years. So again, I'd like to thank the heritage team for understanding what they needed to do with Bankford House to make sure that that collection is managed well in perpetuity, but also to make sure that the community understand its value. And I look forward to, now that Landsborough Museum is now under the operations of council, doing a similar job of growing the visitation there. Finally, on the transport levy, look, there probably is no greater, more important issue for this region than its transport networks right now. I think somewhere in everybody's heads we know that if we do not get the right networks, our lifestyle will get massively impacted and will cease to exist in the way that we know it now. We have to have an effective public transport system. So the next few months, maybe a year, with the announceables coming out of the state and federal governments, are utterly crucial. We have to pay very close attention to the politics of it and do what we can to help them understand just how important the public transport network is to this region's lifestyle offer and to, of course, its environment. But, you know, the transport levy is a big part of that. Again, I thank the community for absorbing an extra cost on their rates bill, when really the responsibility is the state and the federal governments. But we understand without the good planning, we just won't get the network we really absolutely need. But we have delivered an almost complete network of upgraded bus stops. We do have a fantastic innovation in Ride School, which helps people feel better about, you know, encouraging their children to ride to school. It's a good program. FlexiLink, which is basically saying, look, we're a big region, we're the size of a small country. So we do need some of our communities that don't have access to the major transport hubs, some assistance, and that's what FlexiLink does. It gives you a way of getting from where you live to the nearest transport hub.
Can I get you an extension, Councillor?
I'm nearly done.
All right, okay.
Just finally then, perhaps the most important is the planning. As I've already said, if we weren't participating in the planning of our transport networks, we just simply would have no chance of it being the right design. So councillors, don't hesitate for a second now and into the next term of council to be the very strongest advocates you can be. It is critical for this region. Thank you very much for your indulgence.
Thank you, Councillor Babarowski. Councillor Natoli.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did raise a question in regards to the homeless, the Housing and Homeless Action Plan, and in regards to the female sleep bus. We know that it took quite a long time for the community to raise the money for the male sleep bus, but it took only about a week for two philanthropic people to come up with the money to support the female bus. And for some reason, there is a blockage at the moment that the Maroochydore Neighbourhood Centre cannot find a place to locate this bus. And with the homelessness issue that we have here on the Sunshine Coast, I don't think it's good enough that we have not allowed a process to accelerate to get a solution. And the response that I got was that they've contacted Maroochydore Neighbourhood Centre and they continue to work to find a suitable location. I think we need to give it a priority, and I would hope, that we will, hopefully, in the next week, find that location and be able to give them the approval to go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Natoli. Councillor Suarez.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to speak to the environment and livability section of the report. I suppose on behalf of the executive team, I feel a little bit like Peter. It's always really great to hear them be able to shout from the rooftops on the work that their teams have done. And I'd like to thank Bill, and if you could pass on to all of the departments underneath the environment and livability, how very proud we are of the work that they do. We did do a lot in this quarter. Madam CEO is correct. The environment livability strategy was updated to reflect actions that have occurred on the ground and emerging issues. The environment levy has delivered some fantastic things throughout our region. Something that I'm actually really pleased about is the collaborative nature that we are increasingly taking with Noosa Regional Council. And we are undertaking another project with Noosa, which is the coastal process model. So it's a way that we can measure our beaches and make sure that they are in tip-top condition in the future. The Blue Heart Sunshine Coast, we made another acquisition in the Blue Heart, a very important acquisition, and that will further protect that area in terms of flood storage, as well as increasing the biodiversity values in that area. The Dark Sky Reserve in the hinterland is another critical project for our region and will be an amazing asset for our community in the future and also tourists to the region. We had our Biosphere Day. I wasn't able to attend, but Councillor Cox did attend on the day. Apparently 1,000 community members were there, and from all reports it was a very successful day. We also made some more strategic land acquisitions for sport and recreation in the Bly area, which is also a very good strategic decision because we know that we critically need more sport and recreation land for our growing population. That project, I often get a lot of questions about that. It is in the very early planning stages, so we haven't even started master planning, and the community will definitely be involved when we get to that point in time. The waste and resource management strategy, Madam CEO touched on that, but I just wanted to add that part of the strategy is not just what council can do. We certainly take the lion's share, but there's a lot of advocacy and collaboration with the state and federal governments for strategies that benefit our entire country. So improved product stewardship schemes is one of the examples, and all of these activities will help support our transition towards a zero net emissions organisation by 2041. The last thing that I'd like to say is it's been a pleasure, Peter, to share this portfolio with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Suarez. Councillor O'Prey.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and through you. And I too would like to reiterate the excellent service that the economic development teams put together for the Sunshine Coast region and the community. And just a couple of highlights, and I'll start with probably the best, and that's of course due to our acknowledgement this morning of the great man Gary Ashman with the holiday parks. $6.3 million in the quarter coming to the Sunshine Coast Council as a revenue source. It's extraordinary. And with that, I think there was around about 36,000 visitors. So that's just an amazing achievement. So I'd like to thank all the staff that are wrapped around that and the leaseholders and the contractors as well. Mr Mayor, one that we've always been interested in is the dollar spend the council puts back into the economy, particularly into our small businesses, our small and medium businesses, our mum and dad businesses. nearly $90 million went back into the economy. So the ratepayer money comes in and we do the spend, we do the contracts, we do all the jobs around town, but $90 million of it went back to local businesses, which is extraordinary. And of course, in the event space, we had about 24,000 people attend events across the region, and we've had an enormous amount of activity. We've actually had a loss of one in recent times, but the Sunshine Coast Events Board particularly are going from strength to strength, and we've seen them go for a very long time now, and it's been a huge success for this council. And the other thing too is those small mum and dad businesses are making contact with council on a regular basis. 3,075 contacts were made for our programs, our small business programs, advice, and our networking adventures, networking nights. So there's a lot there, and I'd like to thank Greg Laverty and his teams and all the team in economic development as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Prey. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you also to the executives for all of the great work they do and the great report, and for the great words that you have delivered this morning. It's very accurate to say that this council is running exceptionally well. That's no great reflection on the councillors, it's a great reflection. We contribute, all right, but it's a great reflection on the leadership team and the people who work within the council. And in my role, together with Councillor Dixon, as being on the Service Excellence portfolio, we have been working very hard, together with Deborah Robinson and also Scott Taylor and some of their team members, to ensure that the services that are being delivered are done so in as an efficient manner as possible. There have been quite a number of changes that have been made, some of them fairly small, but some of them quite large. And I congratulate those two executive leaders on the job that they do, because it's like a breath of fresh air to have them really work together with us as councillors and with their team members and take them on the journey to make sure that our service excellence is something real, not just something aimed at. Councillor Ted stole a lot of my thunder, as is normal when it comes to quarterly reports or yearly reports, because that's his bag. And I'd just like to congratulate our call centre. They do a fantastic job. You know, the number of calls that they service, deal with online and in person and also by phone is enormous. And you rarely, if ever, hear any criticism of what they do and how they handle people. In addition, although we've only spent just over $6 million on road reseals and refurbishment, I'd just like you to also, the community to also understand that normally it would be much higher than that, but we've had 2.5 months of fairly inclement weather. You can't reseal roads or refurbish roads when it's raining or when it's threatening to rain or when it has been raining just recently. So, for instance, in my division, there's 4 roads that have been programmed on 3 separate occasions from December, January and now February, and it looks like we may not even get it done in February this time, so it might move into March. But that's the sort of problem that our people have to work with. The weather is significantly affecting our operations in parks and in external works, etc. There have been some criticisms in relation to the maintenance of, or the mowing of parks and public areas. But the reality of the situation is we don't use just ordinary hand mowers because of the volume. We use large mowing machines. And as Ted said, as Councillor Hungerford said, if you put them onto wet ground, you finish up with a bog, then there's a lot of repairs that have to be done, and it's not a very satisfactory job. So the Parks team have been trying to get people to understand what is happening and why they're not being mowed or why areas are not being mowed, and they're putting out signs saying it's too wet to mow. And I'm finding that people are understanding it a lot better. So overall, as a councillor, I'm more than appreciative and more than happy with the work that our people do. And on behalf of Councillor Dixon, I would like to thank everybody who's involved in all the portfolios, but especially in the service excellence portfolios. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnston. Councillor Law.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor. I would like to start off by making some observations around the Housing and Homelessness Action Plan. It's not particularly a feature of this quarterly report, so in terms of it being raised earlier was interesting. But there has been a huge amount of work happen in this quarter as a result of the Housing and Homelessness Action Plan. And if I start with the sleep bus, there are a wide range of people, both community organisations, right across the whole Sunshine Coast region, as well as council and the community development team, working very hard with all of the stakeholders involved to find locations for the sleep bus. We have identified a wide range of locations for the sleep bus to be placed, and we are waiting for the organisers of the sleep bus to come back to us and say which one they would like to choose. So if there is something else that Councillor Natoli knows about that is a blockage in this matter, please could he explain exactly what that is to the CEO via writing, or to Mr Laverty, Head of Economic and Community Development. Because I am not aware of any blockages from the community or from council in finding a place for the sleep bus to be located. Yes, it's an issue, we want it there to serve our community, but I am not aware of there being a problem of anything that we can do to change or influence. I would also like to go on and say that the Housing and Homelessness Action Plan in this quarter that we're referring to led to a new policy that was endorsed, I believe, in the last OM for a complete removal of infrastructure charges for anyone who is constructing affordable housing. And notwithstanding, the Housing and Homelessness Action Plan has also brought to the table the state government and other stakeholders who weren't at the table with us because we didn't have a plan. And so to think that there's a problem and for someone to pick out one item is unbelievably disappointing. But while we're talking about the quarter in question, I'd also like to highlight $1.3 million provided to community organisations so that we can collaborate with them and achieve amazing work by working with hundreds more people by providing their organisations with funding. We've had a First Nations Supplier Day. It was impacted by the rain and a whole bunch of things, so we had to find a different day, and we have created a stunning event for First Nations businesses to network between themselves and also with the wider business community so that they could get better outcomes for their business. And there are some very exciting projects emerging from that. One of the most exciting things from my point of view in the community portfolio was the Rewired, a youth-led mental health and wellbeing day with the University of the Sunshine Coast and the Thompson Institute that was created, developed and delivered by the young people of the Sunshine Coast. Absolutely outstanding collaboration and amazing work by our community and by council. Other things that we've done, we've got 8 libraries across the coast. One of them is now open and operational 7 days a week, providing better services for our community. We'll see how that goes. Maybe we need to do more of that. But we are certainly developing a very flexible, responsive library service for the community that meets the current contemporary community needs in this time and this period. We've also completed the showgrounds master planning in Nambour, another important step forward to guide the way for the next 15 years. I'll finish on another one of our incredible projects that's emerged from our engagement with people who are currently living homeless. We have a group of people who've come together who are living homeless at the moment or have a very recent lived experience, and they are working with council as a group to inform us of what are their needs and how, as an organisation, can we respond to them in a meaningful and realistic way. The respect this group have created has seen them talk to other institutions across the coast and other government departments so that they are well informed about how do you make a difference for someone who is sleeping without a home? How do you help those people feel safe? And that work is groundbreaking, is not happening anywhere else in Australia that anyone can tell me. And that is a result of our Housing and Homelessness Action Plan and our willingness to work with and engage everybody in our community. So I think it's been a very successful quarter from a community perspective, and I'm looking forward to us doing more. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Law. If there are no further speakers, I'll go to Councillor Hungerford to close. Not necessary. We'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Craig, Therese. Thanks very much for your presentation. Councillors, we'll move to item 8.2, which is the January 2024 Financial Performance Report. And I'm sure Mr Costello and Ms Dunbar will be with us in a moment. Good morning. Michael and Sharon, welcome.
Thank you.
Floor is
Mr.
yours.
Mayor, morning all. Thank you. Today I present the January Financial Performance Report. As at the end of January, so 7 months, Council's operating result of $182.5 million is ahead of current budget by $3.2 million. Our revenues are on budget in bottom line, and our expenses are under budget by about $3.2 million. Of the revenues, the holiday park is ahead of budget by about $1.2 million, about 5.3%. Fees are below budget for the Clown and Music Festival, quarry services and plumbing applications, and a couple of those are offset by reduced expenditure as well in contract expenses for the Clown and Music Festival, the quarry and solar farms also below budget in expenditure. On our capital works program, our total capital works programs progressed at 49% of the total. 162 million of our 332 million programs financially expended. On our core program, we're just under 42%, and $70 million has been expended to the end of January. Our cash flows, Council's cash is $203.9 million at the end of January. We're coming into an increase in cash with the rates due in a couple of weeks. Our debt is sitting at $425 million. And our anticipated new borrowings by the end of this year, financial year is $28.5 million, made up of $26.6 for the waste business and holiday parks $1.9 million. Our investment performance, we currently have 12 term deposits totalling $130 million, a range in deposits between 0 and 179 days, and the weighted average of those is 5.08%. And the recommendation, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Michael. Someone to move? Councillor Hungerford, thank you. Councillor Natoli is seconding, thank you. Would you like to open, Councillor Hungerford, please?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Michael has covered quite a lot of that, but I'll cover the main points. Because we're in an excellent financial position, considering the strange criticism we get out there or the Fantasyland things that Council's got a financial problem. As Michael said before, our operating result, $82.5 million. That's $3.2 million above the current budget. We have $501 million operating revenue, which is on budget. As of the 31st of January, $319 million has been expended, resulting in a variance of $3.1 million, 1% lower than budget. As of the 31st of January, $162 million, or 48.8% of Council's $332.6 million capital works program has been financially expended. And that's pretty significant considering the wet weather we've had, to actually be still getting through that much of our works in a very adverse climate. The core capital program has progressed 41.6% of budget, and actual spend is $70.5 million. Our corporate major projects have progressed 58.1%. An important one here is very healthy cash balance, and we've got the rest of the rate receipts to come in at the moment. We've got $203.9 million in cash, and our debt, $425 million. Against $7 billion worth of assets, that is a very healthy balance sheet when you consider the incomings to servicing debt. Because we've got a low debt, more of our income goes into actually delivering for the community. and keeping control of that in expenditure, I hope the next council continues this path, because it will deliver enormous results over time. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hungerford. Councillor Natoli? Councillor Natoli.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just through you, question to you, Michael. Before COVID, we used to get a report on the contribution that the airport made as part of the deal, that a portion of their income came to council, and that has never really been shown on our financial papers ever since. In fact, I'm not even sure, as a councillor, what the current contribution is. I know the airport has recovered, but it would be really good to be able to have a monthly indication of how that contribution is supporting our finances.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's included in other revenue. We can certainly give further information on that. Budget's around about 1.9 million for this year, and we are well on track. If we go back to COVID, we were around about 600,000, 500 to 600,000. That's 5% of net revenue of the airport. So we very much de-risked, particularly during COVID, that particular business, and we've got a good cash flow coming through. So about 1.9 million, which is increasing. I think their flights are back to above what they were pre-COVID, which is reflected in the revenues that we get.
You're done, Councillor. Thank you. Councillor Suarez.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I just have a question out of curiosity, Mr. Costello. It's just about the operating result and the operating revenue. Excuse me. We've got the Caloundra Music Festival revenue below budget, but it's been reported in the October financial report, the November, December and this January report. Why are we spreading the accounting for the Caloundra Music Festival over so many months?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the Caloundra Music Festival is $1.6 million below budget for revenue, and that's offset by about 639,000 below budget in expenses. It's just noted as a variation, which is what I do in the report. So it's not so much spread over a number of months. We've got a full year budget which we have allocated as at the end of January, and they're the numbers they're showing in the variations to that budget.
So just to clarify that, so we're not still receiving fees, or we're not still paying out expenses, it's just because that's the cumulative total that we've received so far this year. Thank you.
Councillor Cox.
Mayor, I know that it's already been spoken to by Councillor Johnston, but we have had a lot of issues with wet weather, and considering we're talking about the January 2024 financial performance report, I just wanted to sort of touch on a couple of those particular challenges that our staff have been faced with. As he mentioned, the road crews, the reseal and rehabilitation programs have been affected, but not only that, our parks and gardens, the mowing and maintenance. I was recently talking with our Parks and Gardens coordinator, and he was talking about the challenges that not just our council has faced, but this is across southeast Queensland. We've had huge rain, and he talks about around about 800 millimetres in January down the southern end of the coast, around that sort of Merredin Plains little mountain area. So that's certainly affected the ability for staff to get there and mow. Plus we've had this really high humidity which has seen grass growth, nothing like I can recall in my 12 years of being a councillor. It's been phenomenal. So I just wanted to sort of point out to our community that if we were to do an extra cut, that would have, because we maintain around about 1,100 hectares that gets mowed every cut, one additional cut is a $450,000 hit to our budget. So when we're talking about that, we need to take that into consideration. You know, we want to be good financial stewards of our money, but we also want our area to look and feel as we expect it to. So when I've been talking with members of the community that have expressed concern with, grass height around knee height, I actually point out that we're not immune here. We're not pioneers in that space of long grass. Brisbane, Logan, Moreton, they've all had similar issues, and they've all been doing a similar message, trying to educate the community that it's too wet to mow, we'll come back when we get the opportunity. So I just wanted to take that opportunity, considering we're talking about the financial performance report at the moment. And Mr. Taylor, if you could pass on to your staff that we certainly appreciate them working weekends to catch up. They're doing a great job, considering I think I've mowed my grass at home about 4 times in the last 2 weeks. So I know how hard that is to keep on top of. So 1,100 hectares is certainly no easy feat. So thank you.
Councillor Cox. Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and Michael. It's always a pleasure to speak about our financial reports, because they were always exceptional. Most of the things have been dealt with, but I just want to deal with the situation that we had prior to Christmas, during Christmas, and after Christmas with disaster management. We were very fortunate that we avoided most of the damage, if not all, practically all of the damage that occurred on the Gold Coast, Brisbane and in North Queensland. And that's in no small part to the job that Scott Taylor and his team have done, because they've been available to manage any eventuality that might occur while the rest of us are away having fun. So thank you, Scott, to you and your team. And I was wondering, Michael, if you'd be able to tell us, did we have expenditure to cover? I know there was some damage in certain areas, but how much did we, have we allocated an amount for it? Do we know what it was costing us?
Mayor, I don't know that off the top of my head, but we do have that covered in relation to a $5 million restricted fund for when a disaster is declared. We haven't had a disaster declared, but we do actually have $500,000 of that, which is then to assist those particular areas, so their budget is not overly impacted. But the amount, I don't have a quantum as to what that amount is, but I can certainly provide that.
Yes, and it's important, thank you very much, and it's important to understand that when disasters do strike, we have a lot of extra work that has to be carried out in a very short period of time, and it takes our people away from their normal duties to attend to all of those. And I've experienced the disaster that we had in 2022, in February 2022, and I was just gobsmacked at how our workforce worked around the clock. 2 shifts, round the clock, 7 days a week. And that's the sort of work ethic that we have within our people. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Johnston. If there are no further speakers, I'm going to go back to Councillor Hungerford to close. Not necessary. We'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, and thank you very much, Michael and Sharon. Appreciate it. Item 8.3 is an application for development permit for reconfiguring a lot for a subdivision. Welcome, Mark Connell and Alida. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and good morning, councillors. The application before you seeks a development permit for reconfiguring a lot, creating 3 lots from 1, and also a dwelling house and 2 dwelling houses on 2 of those lots. The site's located in Doonan, just northeast of the Yamundi Township, and is currently a disused golf course. The site is 22.5 hectares and is partly under drainage easement. The site is partly zoned rural residential on the eastern side and sport and recreation for the remainder. So the split zoning was a result of a previous subdivision that was undertaken in 2013 and reflects the area that is subject to flooding. So the proposal, as I mentioned, creates 3 lots from the one, 2 of rural residential size being 7,160 and the other being 6,000, and the balance parcel, with dwelling houses proposed on 2 of those rural residential lots. During the public notification period, there were 24 submissions, of which 7 were properly made, and they identify that 5 were in support and 19 objected to the proposal. In regards to the assessment, the proposal complies with the majority of the planning scheme regarding managing the constraints of the site and lot size. A dwelling house use, though, is inconsistent in the sport and recreation zone and therefore is a departure from the planning scheme. As such, there is the consideration of other relevant matters required to determine whether there are stronger reasons to approve or refuse the application. In our opinion, the reasons that warrant approval, including the privatised nature of the land holding, the protection of flood-prone land, and the ability to potentially use the land for sport and recreation purposes, remains. There are some other matters that may warrant refusal, including the potential intrusion of residential land, the land holding that may compromise or conflict with sport and recreation activities. However, in this instance, our view is that the matters that warrant approval are stronger than those that warrant refusal of the application. And on that basis, officers recommend approval of this application.
Councillor Suarez.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor, I'd like to move an alternative motion. It is up on the board. I just want to check there was a typo. Thank you. The alternative motion is that Council A, receive and note the report titled Application for Development Permit for Reconfiguration of a Lot for Subdivision 1 into 3 lots and a development permit for a material change of use for a dwelling house. B, refuse the application, and I'll just summarise this because I have handed this out to councillors previously, Mr Mayor. Situated at 215 Valley Drive, Doonan, because the proposed development departs from Part 3 Strategic Framework 3.3 Settlement Pattern, 3.3.3 Growth Management Boundaries and Land Use Categories 3.3.3.1 C, D, I and III. Number 2, the proposed development departs from the following planning scheme assessment benchmarks: Sport and Recreation Zone Code, overall outcome 6.2.13.2 H, I, N and O. Landslide Hazard and Steep Land Overlay Code, overall outcome 2.2 A, C, 4 and P, performance outcome 1. And Biodiversity, Waterways and Wetlands Overland Code, performance outcome 2 and performance outcome 9. There's a few following reasons underneath that. Number 3, the proposed development cannot be conditioned to comply with the assessment benchmarks. And number 4, there are no discretionary matters which warrant approval of the proposed development.
Someone prepared to second? Councillor Dixon. Please open.
This was a matter that I considered long and hard. It was not something that I had a snap decision about, and it was not a light decision to bring this to council today. The application for the residential development is inconsistent with sport and recreation zoning, and through the submissions, the residents of the Doonan community have told council that they are fearful of future potential development on the balance of the sport and recreation land. The third reason is that as a region, we are falling behind with the supply of sport and recreation land for our community. And I'll go through those 3 reasons. The inconsistent zoning use, sport and recreation. The application as it is titled is 1 into 3 lots, and on its appearance and on its own merits seems to be quite a low impact to the surrounding residential development. And the design that has been put forward by the applicants fits within the residential development that is currently surrounding this application. However, it is inconsistent with the zoning of the land and the expectations of use on that land by the surrounding residents. The site itself is largely constrained due to flooding, and should that limited land that is not as severely flood affected be consumed by residential development, it constrains the potential uses that could occur on the balanced land. For example, it would restrict the placement of sporting infrastructure, such as a clubhouse or change room facilities. The second reason was the residents' fears for future development on the sport and recreation land. I read every single submission that was made on this application, whether they were properly or not properly made, and of the 5 that were in support, 3 were cut and paste submissions, so essentially saying exactly the same thing word for word. Of the 19 that were against, I found 2 that were cut and paste submissions. However, many of them had similar themes of concern. The concerns were primarily around setting a precedence for further development on sport and recreation land, about the expectation of what could occur on that sport and recreation land, and concerns for wildlife and biodiversity. When I read through each submission, I did make notes of their concern, and here were the ones from those who were opposed. Incorrect zoning, sets a precedence, forces council to give similar approvals, sets precedence for further development. We purchased with expectation of the neighbouring land to remain as sport and recreation. It's a precedent for future applications, opens up for further construction. 2 houses, but surely opens up for further development. Purchased in 1997 with one reason, because it bordered recreation zone. Further housing, domino effect. Advertised as no subdivision, it should stay as zoned. Purchased in 2018 with expectation that there would be no further properties on this land. Witnessed encroachment around this land over the years, and that's that last one. So they were the submission concerns that were raised by those who were opposed to this application. There is no indication of what is to occur on the balance of the sport and recreation land, and we can't predict the future of the balanced land. However, we can learn from the past. As stated in one submission, and I did do some research, when this property was put up for sale in 2022, it did state in the advertisement, subdivision not permitted. However, here we are today with an application to subdivide the lot 1 into 3. Across the road from this site is the 25-hectare Noosa Valley Golf Course, which was advertised for sale late last year. The media article in the Sunshine Coast News on the 3rd of October 2023 states an array of interest in the property for the following potential uses: a family commune, a wedding venue and day spa, luxury retreat from the owners of the Spices Retreat, which the existing one has 22 rooms across 14 villas, restaurant, cooking school, and accommodates weddings. And the only other purpose that would comply with the sport and recreation zone would be to bring the country club back to life. The article does also admittedly say it won't get developed on for residential estate because it is zoned sport and rec.
Councillor, can I just get you an extension?
Yes, please, Mr Mayor.
Moved Councillor Johnson, seconded Councillor Dixon. All those in favour? That's carried. Please continue.
Thank you. This could be a case of history repeating. Sport and recreation land sold and applications that come in for uses outside of the sport and recreation consistent and potential uses. The third reason was we are falling behind in sport and recreation land. At the October 2023 ordinary meeting, we endorsed the refreshed environment and livability strategy. In the presentation for that item, we were shown our progress for various targets. One of those targets is hectares of land per 1,000 residents for sport and recreation purposes is maintained. For the 2022-23, our result was 4.62 hectares per 1,000 residents, which was a reduction from our baseline of 4.74 hectares per 1,000 residents. The longer term target is 5 hectares by 1,000 residents by 2041. I'm not sure if any of you recall, but I did make some comments at that OM when I spoke about that target and spoke about the struggles we may face in achieving that target with such an influx of people coming to our region and the limited land that remains suitable for sport and recreation. It begs the question, why would we give any sport and recreation land away for residential uses, which only tips the scale further? It is our role to represent our community. The number of submissions and the content of those in opposition to this application is why I have come to you today. I ask my fellow councillors to consider not only the application of 1 into 3 lots on inconsistently zoned land, but also to think about the broader implications which are precedents for further residential development on sport and rec land and the loss of badly needed sport and recreation land for our growing community. And I look for your support on this alternative motion.
Thank you, Councillor Suarez. Councillor Cox.
Looks like no one else was interested in speaking, so I may as well. But through you, Mr. Mayor, I've always appreciated Councillor Suarez being diligent in offering her reasons to any sort of alternate that she provides. So you've certainly done your homework with this one as well. However, when I read through the report and my lens goes over the thorough assessment process that the staff have done, I kind of see it a little bit differently to, obviously, you do. So when I review this particular application, I see that there is that protection of the flood-prone land. And I know that you're interested in preserving the sport and recreation zone land as well. And you talk about, obviously, the ELS targets, etc. This is privately owned land, so it does present some challenges, and I certainly appreciate the argument you've put forth today. However, I'm just going to check what I wrote here. I honestly, when I go through the attachments of the report as well, I certainly appreciate your point of view, and you know you've got that commitment to your residents up there about the sport and recreation land. However, I will be supporting the officer's recommendation, and I'll actually foreshadow that I will move that should this motion be defeated. But I just can't find anything in there to override the officer's recommendation at this stage.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to the officers. I just want to ask a question firstly. In the ecologically important areas, we have the riparian protection area. What's the purpose of that, and what's the risk of it flooding?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the riparian areas, the riparian protection area is largely to identify areas of wetlands and also buffer areas to then ensure that that those wetlands are protected. In this circumstance, they were able to demonstrate through the ecological assessment they provided that this development would be able to meet the provisions of the Biodiversity, Waterways and Wetlands Overlay Code, and that was probably one of the reasons why officers supported this application.
Right, thank you. My experience with development applications over some 13 years is that I've rarely ever seen an application come in where there hasn't been supporting recommendations from some consultants in relation to all of these sort of things. I'm with Councillor Maria Suarez in relation to this. I think that, you know, if you look at our overlay code, overlays and our mapping, quite a substantial portion of the area that they want to subdivide shows either a landslide hazard, it's in some form of riparian protection area, and a bushfire hazard area or buffer. And I think there's a chance that it can cause problems for our wetland, which is adjacent, by allowing this subdivision and the precedent that it creates. I just can't, in all conscience, vote to support an approval of this application, so therefore I'll be supporting Councillor Suarez. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnston. Councillor Babarowski.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to ask a question, if I may, because I'd like to focus a little more on the issue of sport and rec land zoning. And I wonder whether you might, with fear of perhaps repeating yourself in how you explained that in the presentation, could you just again get us to understand how the planning assessment team decided that this was an acceptable development in sport and rec land? Generally speaking, the assessment team would be very reluctant to approve an application in a zoning such as that. So could you talk a little bit more about why you thought it was an acceptable development in a sport and rec zone? Do you think that there is something in the argument of a precedent?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, in regards to the first question about the sport and recreation zone land, one of the considerations in this is that the site is privately owned, and therefore the obligation would then be on a private developer or a private person to then develop it for a particular purpose. Now, whether that's for any sort of a particular sport, obviously it has been used as golf previously, but has since been disused. Our view was that there is still sufficient area that if they wanted to reuse as a golf course, noting that the site towards the rear in particular, or the area in particular at the rear, is under a drainage easement and is subject to flooding, and therefore this represented part of the area that was flood-free and would therefore be suitable in regards to having residential development on that front portion. When we were also considering then the character of the neighbouring area, we felt that there was a similarity in terms of the lot sizes that are akin to what is existing in that area, and therefore we felt that in this circumstance it would be appropriate that we actually do that. I would also further note that in regards to the lot sizes for sport and recreation zone land, there actually is no minimum lot size that's specified under the reconfiguration of a lot code, and therefore someone without any other purpose could actually come and actually propose a similar development as a code accessible application. Obviously then the actual future use would then need to be considered, and any subdivision obviously would need to be assessed against the sport and recreation zone code. But to that end, we felt that in this particular circumstance, we could support that, noting that we felt that the reasons to approve the development were stronger than those that warranted refusal. In regards to your second question about precedent, every application is always assessed on its merits, and we also did look in terms of potential future development of this site as to whether, that previous 2013 application, which did subdivide portions of that site, which were rural residential as well. And so we did consider how that could potentially work in a future sense. In our view, because of the flooding constraints and even the rural residential zone portion on the site that's located on the eastern side is actually is not flood free, and therefore wouldn't be able to be developed upon. And so we felt that this was then an appropriate land use for the balance of this site.
Please.
Thank you. Look, thanks for that, Mark. It's always a very comprehensive explanation. Could you give us some insight into what the argument was, or what the submission was from our sport and rec team on this application? Did they have a view about the short supply of sport and rec land and how this may or may not be part of a future solution to that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll be very honest, our consultation with the Sport and Recreation team was very light in this circumstance, mainly because it is privately owned, and therefore our team primarily work in our public sites, but they do obviously work with private partners as well to assist them in that. In our view, we looked at other types of sport uses that could potentially occur on this site, and they largely come down to, the golfing type scenario. In our view, given the flooding situation on that site, it is more for that open recreation. So someone could potentially put for example, a golf driving range on that as a code accessible application. And we felt that in this circumstance, that the proposal that was put forward by the applicant was a more suitable outcome for the site.
That's a question to the councillor.
Please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Suarez, thank you again for putting your argument up so eloquently. I just wonder whether you have, again, from your research or from your view of the shortage of sport and rec land, do you think that this parcel of land has a reasonable contribution to that shortage, given what you've heard from the assessment officers, that it is in private ownership?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Babarowski. With this individual application, it is a very small drop in the bucket in terms of what sport and recreation land would be removed. However, it's death by 1,000 cuts. So this is one application. As we've heard, there were applications in 2013 which further subdivided that area. I have a number of privately owned sport and recreation facilities throughout Division 9, which have also become under threat from residential development on the edges, further eroding the sport and recreation land. So while this application itself in nature is not that intense in terms of its impact, it is the precedence that it sets for what the area has already experienced in the past in terms of pressure of taking away sport and recreation land for residential purposes.
Thank you, Councillor Babarowski. Councillor Hungerford.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I'm going to support Councillor Suarez today and congratulate her on well researched and well presented in the facts. It's a difficult one. I come at this from the precedent angle. After 20 years here and reading so many planning and environment court judgments, both successful and unsuccessful, precedence plays a big part. This is sport and rec land. This is an inconsistent use in that zoning. So you're departing from the intended uses. I've experienced that with an application in my area that I got council to quite rightly refuse, but we lost that in court. And when I read the judgment, it's because previous councils have been inconsistent in applying to those uses and giving relaxation in other cases. Because council wasn't being consistent, the court could not support council. And this is like a death with 1,000 cuts, as Maria has said. Each one incrementally adds up. Courts can back you up if you're consistent in your approach. If you're inconsistent, they cannot. And they do not. I've read that in a lot of the summaries. So I think it's quite right that we protect the sport and rec land. In this case, don't give another precedent to be used in another case where we want to stop an application on sport and rec land, but then the applicant's legal team in court will say, oh, but the council's been inconsistent. Here are the cases where they've allowed it in the past. Similar things. And that works against you when you try and defend your position. So on that, I'll be supporting Councillor Suarez today in this application, and well done, well presented.
Thank you, Councillor Hungerford. Councillor Dixon.
Yep, good morning. Firstly, quick plug for Councillor Maria, great councillor, and done her homework as always. Councillor Ted said most of what I was going to say, but residents continually tell me, support the planning scheme, protect the planning scheme, don't deviate from the planning scheme. Today we're being asked to deviate from the planning scheme. Sport and rec, it's not the houses. This isn't going to sort and solve the housing crisis. It's not going to help at all. My view is that we actually need to look at this site in the new planning scheme. We've just heard the urban zone is actually inundated by water and not suitable for urban purposes. Need to review that in the new planning scheme. So why don't we look at some of these sport and rec pieces of land in the new scheme and rezone them accordingly? For the arguments Councillor Maria presented today, I won't be supporting the officer recommendation, and I'll back the local councillor.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr Cornell, I've always had the greatest level of respect for the work that our officers do in assessing these challenging approvals. But you made a comment, and you touched on it again when you were responding to Councillor Babarowski, that the argument for approval was stronger than the argument for refusal. Can you just perhaps try and encapsulate from what you've said and reinforce why you believe the case is stronger for approval than it is for refusal?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and through you. When we were considering the other relevant matters in this circumstance under the Planning Act, as I mentioned, that's a test that that came in with the Planning Act in 2017. And what it actually goes to is probably a different consideration as to how the courts had been considering previously. So what they now do is consider the weigh up of, well, what are the matters in this instance that warrant approval, what warrants refusal, and they determine which is the stronger. So in our view, we looked at the other relevant matters in terms of that in our view would warrant support. What we identified is that the golf course site was in private ownership, and we felt the balance was sufficiently sized to accommodate expansion of a golf course or a separate sport and recreation land use. We also felt that the balance of the lot was flood prone, and therefore that would have effectively limited any further expansion of residential use into that zone. We also considered that it didn't conflict with the balance so that the actual uses of dwelling houses didn't conflict with what could occur, I guess, in the balance. And also that the owners of the site had indicated, and there is actually an underpass that goes under Valley Drive that can then actually connect the two sites, and therefore actually the clubhouses and the like be actually used through the one parcel. So we felt that then that there is actually the opportunity, because it's privately owned and not owned by the other golf course, that there could be the opportunity for that shared arrangement as well. Conversely, and probably to some of the points that Councillor Maria has made in regards to those other relevant matters that were against, which talked about that intrusion of those land uses which are under the scheme are indicated as being incompatible, and also the different growth management boundaries that sit within the strategic plan, as Councillor Maria again has mentioned. And what we felt in that circumstance was that the balance of those and how you could actually manage those impacts, which is often what the courts go to in regards to that consideration of other relevant matters, could actually be addressed and in our view could therefore be supported in this circumstance.
Thank you. If there are no further speakers, we better go. Thank you, Councillor Landsberg. Councillor Babarowski, you'd like to speak?
Yes, please. Look, to some extent, I think for me what always is the core argument is the greater good. And to some extent, I think you really framed very clearly the difference between the greater good from a social perspective than a planning perspective. And I really respect the fact that they both have valid arguments. But to some extent, I think that the role of the body politic is sometimes to look at the greater good as perceived from the planning assessment process and ask ourselves through the community, through the submissions, does this serve the greater good? And I think you've articulated a greater good that in this case is stronger for me than the arguments that have been put forward as to why it can, on balance, be an approval. So I'm going to support your alternative for refusal today on the basis that I do think, on balance, and from a social and political perspective, I think that the greater good is better served. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cox, do you have a question?
Just a question to my fellow councillors in their deliberations. Just keen to understand if they're willing to continually spend ratepayer money defending things like this in court, because those funds can go towards providing services for our community. So something to consider.
That was an unusual question. I think you can present your answer in your vote in the end. Councillor Law.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, just want to speak by way of making an observation on the conversation of the sport and recreation land and the commentary that this is private land, so on that basis we have really no control over what private land can be used for other than how it is zoned in the planning scheme. So the other part of our sport and recreation land is the land that council owns and holds and manages on behalf of the community. And I am aware of the shortage and the stress that those lands, those facilities and those sporting clubs are under on the basis of the number of organisations that come forward who are looking for somewhere to carry out their sport or recreation activity. And it is really difficult to find a space and a place for them to be, and then to find a space and a place that has got the right infrastructure for their particular sport or activity. So here we've got a large parcel of land that is sport and recreation land. We happen not to own it. But if we go for the short-term solution of, oh, here's a couple of houses and oh, it'll just sit there until we can get the next couple of houses and then the next couple, we will continue, as has been already mentioned, the death of 1,000 cuts to land that has been identified and zoned as sport and recreation. So I think you can probably tell that I will support Councillor Maria for all of the reasons that have been given, but I just want to add that one in as well on the basis of we don't have enough sport and recreation land today. We are an incredibly fast-growing region with another many, over 100,000 people coming in the next 15 to 20 years. We have to protect our recreation spaces as we protect our environmental and green spaces. So I will support this because we've got to support our open sport and recreation place. Thank you very much for everyone, and particularly Councillor Maria, for the case you've put forward. And I understand those perspectives around wanting to do the best for the community and having to consider the legal cost argument in there. Very good point, well made and noted. But I do find myself coming to support the protection of our sport and rec land. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Law. If there are no further speakers, I'll go to Councillor Suarez to close. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor. It brings me no joy to bring this to Council here today, and I feel a great deal of empathy for the applicants. I also thank the Council staff for their assessment of this application, because you have done your jobs thoroughly and professionally, and I understand your reasons for putting it forward as a recommendation. But as has been mentioned, as the local councillor, it is my job to represent the community, of which Doonan is one of the areas I represent. I also just wanted to mention in regards to the applicant and this application in particular, while the balance is not flood-free and is unlikely to be developed, as Mr Cornell mentioned, it hasn't stopped developers in the past from putting in more intensive applications and trying to manage their flood risk through engineered solutions. This applicant didn't do that. They really just looked at what they could put on the site. So I do have a lot of empathy for the applicant. However, as Councillor Dixon mentioned, there is a pathway forward for the owners of this land, and that is through a rezoning for the new planning scheme. And through that process, that gives the entire community the opportunity to have a say on what their expectations are for this area of Doonan. I look forward to your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Suarez. All those in favour of Councillor Suarez's motion? Okay, Councillor Babarowski, Councillor Natoli, Councillor Johnston, Councillor Dixon, Councillor Hungerford, Councillor O'Prey, Councillor Suarez, Councillor Law, Councillor Jamieson. Those opposed? Councillor Cox, and we note Councillor Landsberg has left the meeting, so the motion is carried. Thank you. We'll move now to item 8.4, the Sunshine Coast Standing Orders 2024, and invite Megan Friend to give us a presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, this report presents the updated standing orders for your consideration this morning. They now accommodate recent amendments to the Local Government Act and the model meeting procedures issued by the Department of State Government, Infrastructure, Local Government and Planning. The amendments mainly relate to the management of councillor conduct and conduct complaints referred back to council. And we've also included a rule relating to foreshadowing of motions to aid for procedural clarity during debate. Thank you.
Someone to move? Councillor Hungerford. And a seconder? Councillor O'Prey, thank you. Would you like to open, Councillor?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. When this one was brought to me, I got a little bit of concern with it, because previously those sort of things were handled by someone outside of council, third party, looking at things. What concerns me is this could be weaponised, used as a tactic. Councillors in groups or individuals wanting to target another councillor. So what we'd have to look at here, we've got to come, when we do this, as governance is my portfolio, very clear guidelines on how we deal with this and each other. What constitutes, and whether it's a majority decides that, because someone will have to put a complaint in. We've been very good, we've got 3 or 4 terms now, haven't seen any issues internally with councillors in meeting or the conduct. Any conduct's been outside of that, and there's been very few cases. But you never know what the future holds, and it depends on the makeup of the people sitting around this table and how they approach things. This is something we have to do, because the department's now decided that council is going to deal with a lot of these matters. I think it goes to the OIA and they'll send back to us if they consider it a council matter. So then we'll have to, the CEO, the Mayor and the councillors then have to look at it and come up with a respectful consensus view on how to deal with taking this forward. If the matter is a legitimate matter, how do we deal with it? What are the repercussions or that for the councillor? And this would have to go on the annual report too, all of those as well. So this is something we're going to have to develop as we go along. We have to come up with very firm guidelines and very sound ones on how we deal with it, but I believe we're capable of doing that. So I put this forward today because we have to do it. How we do it and how we execute it is up to us in the future. So I think early in the new term of council, we need to sit down and get a very good guideline around this, Madam CEO, and how councillors are going to deal with this into the future, because this is new. But I want to see it used properly and legitimately for where if there is an issue, it's dealt with, but not to become vexatious or frivolous in the way it's dealt with. So unknown, but I'm sure we're up to the task, and if mature adults come at this and we look at clear guidelines, I believe we can competently do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hungerford. Councillor Babrowski.
Look, I'd like to thank Councillor Hungerford for his caution. So I'd like to ask a question of the CEO. Given that this recommendation is to adopt the standing orders of 2024 with this appendix, do you have any concerns that reflect the concerns of Councillor Hungerford, or do you think they can be managed?
Through you, Mr Mayor, and thank you for your question, Councillor. I am confident that we can manage the concerns. For one, all complaints in the complaint process hasn't really changed in that it starts with the OIA, and any investigation would be allocated to us from the OIA. So there is a check and balance that is external to council that exists today that will continue to be in place. The second thing is we still need to develop our investigation policy, and that will be presented to council in the new term of council. So there will be ample time for the new council to consider how the standing orders will be made into effect through that process. So I think with those two elements, there is an ample set of checks and balances around it to manage any concerns around vexatious or frivolous complaints, if that is the major concern.
On the basis of that reassurance, I would support the recommendation. Thanks.
Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Megan. When you do say you want to be a councillor training course, which is compulsory before you can lodge your application or your nomination, it says in there that everybody should be familiar with the standing orders currently. Can I suggest that we send a copy of the new standing orders to the returning officer, because we don't, or the presiding returning officer, and ask them to circulate it to all candidates, because we don't have the contact details for all of the candidates. Is that possible? Yeah, thank you.
Councillors, I won't get to speak to many more motions, and I'm not going to speak for very long on this one, but I don't support it, particularly around the what's considered unsuitable meeting behaviour. The Mayor, or the Chair, as the case might be, has been elected by a majority of their entire community. And if we were all mature adults, as someone mentioned, we wouldn't need these sort of instructions passed down from those who consider themselves more important than us at another level of government. They refuse to recognise that the majority of people, in our case on the Sunshine Coast, have made a determination about who they want to lead their council, and that person should have the satisfactory and appropriate skills to manage meetings in a way that's considered fair and reasonable. However, sometimes, perhaps through no fault of the chairs, but rather the behaviour of others, that position can be compromised. So I think this is, just overreach, in my view. If we've got to be constantly provided with instructions around how we manage our behaviour and work as a team, then that's a fundamental flaw in the individuals involved. And I just think it's inappropriate that the government, the state government, or a bureaucrat in the state government, thinks that their opinion is more important than the opinion of the majority of people on the Sunshine Coast. So for that reason, I won't be supporting it. Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm enormously supportive of the points that you make. What I'd like to ask the CEO is, if we don't adopt this, where are we? What is likely to happen?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have to comply with the requirements of the Act that has been brought down. In terms of non-compliance, I'm not sure, but maybe Megan might have an answer specific to that, or Mr. Matheson in the civic governance role. I'm sure that there will be some consequences that the state would require us to follow this Act.
Through the Chair, Councillor, thank you for your question. The requirement under the Act is that our standing orders must be consistent with the model standing orders that are promulgated by the department. Should council standing orders, or meeting procedures is the term ordinarily used, there's no problem with them being called standing orders. Should they not be consistent, the model meeting procedures or standing orders prevail.
I don't know about the rest of the council, but I actually served on 2 terms with Landsborough Shire and Maroochy Council where there was...
Caloundra.
Pardon? Caloundra, I say. Oh, right, sorry. Caloundra and Landsborough. Call me Mr. Biden, or President Biden. Sorry about that. And there was a particular councillor on that council who carried on despicably, made it exceptionally difficult for the mayor and for all the council officers as well as the fellow councillors. And although I understand exactly what the mayor is commenting on and saying, I think these sort of rules and regulations are designed for the worst case scenarios. And unfortunately, from time to time, we have to deal with someone who is the worst case scenario. So I will reluctantly vote for the recommendation.
Councillor O'Prey.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you, Mr. Mayor, Mark, I'd like to thank you for standing up and saying that today, because I've been flip-flopping on this a lot. I've had a lot of conversations with staff on this item here today, and to be quite frank, I was going to listen to the conversation before I even made a decision on this one. So I just want to thank you for you taking the time and effort to actually know and understand this at the highest level to make that decision of yours today, and you've actually helped me in guidance with my decision-making process, so I thank you for that. My real concerns here are exactly what Ted mentioned earlier and Councillor Hungerford mentioned earlier, and that's about the weaponising of it. It's almost like a sport, council bashing, and I can see it a lot, particularly in my world at the moment, where it's becoming more and more prevalent and it's more and more obvious to me. And I think opening the door somewhat and allowing activity that can be brought to this chamber for decision at times is probably not the right course of action. And I still don't have a thorough understanding of the abilities of council to suppress names on frivolous accusations. So I'm not entirely clear on that as yet. And I have asked the question a million times, but someone mentioned the annual report just before. I might even ask that question if I can of you, Megan, right now. In the instance where it's a frivolous complaint comes through to council, will that still go through the annual report? And understanding that we're almost, if someone puts a frivolous report in on any one of the councillors and they can't discuss and debate and vote on that issue, they have to step out of the room. They're effectively dobbing themselves in. Where do we sit with the annual report? Can you just open that up a little bit for me?
Sure. So the requirements, through you, Mr. Chair, the requirements of the Act require that should a councillor be found to have erred, that councillor's name is published in the annual report, and those provisions carry through with the recent changes.
So for absolute clarity, a frivolous complaint can come in and that council that's been complained against, even though it's been dismissed, will still go through the annual report. Is that a yes or a no?
That's a different scenario, Madam CEO.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Just to add to Megan's response, the OIA still, as they do today, does a check and balance against frivolous or vexatious reports. And although we, through the obligations that are on me, have to report and provide those reports through to the OIA, they do that, and they do quite a thorough check of vexatiousness and any frivolous reports. So that process is still in place. It's not going to be a council decision whether that's frivolous or not. If the OIA determines that it's not frivolous and it warrants further investigation and passes it back, that's when this process kicks in. I think to one of the other comments that you made, that the subject councillor has to leave the room, I don't believe that that's the case. The standing orders actually say that the subject officer, while they have a conflict of interest and can't participate in the vote, there may be occasions where they are asked to stay to participate and answer any questions that are available, so that they're available to that. So I just wanted to clarify that with you too. That's in the documentation that's provided to you today. I hope that assists. Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no further... Sorry, Councillor Cox.
Sorry about that, Mr. Chair. I've just taken into consideration some of the comments around the room, and I just wanted to point out something that I've never sat in, obviously, the chair's position in 12 years, so I can't sort of anticipate sort of what that role has been. Obviously, it's a fairly challenging one at times, but certainly you've been a very fair chair. Certainly in my time, I think you've been very reasonable, in fact, and so I can certainly sympathise with those concerns that you've spoken to and appreciate your stance in that particular matter. So it is with reluctance that I will be supporting this here today, so I just wanted to make that known.
Thank you. No further speakers. We go back to Councillor Hungerford to close.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to everyone for putting in this, because this is new territory we're going into. But the important point made is the department has brought this down. Applies to all councils. And if we don't, the model meeting procedures that they have in place will prevail. Which means we can't knock this back, and I do understand what the Mayor's saying, very good points there. But we have to adopt this and we have to manage it. It's not a if you would like to, it's we have to. And then we have to come up with our own procedures and how we're going to deal with it internally. That's what I was saying too. We need to get that bedded down very quickly and have clear rules and the way it's going to be dealt with. So this will be, as we go along, get this right. Because I certainly don't want to see it descend into where it just becomes divisive in council and becomes a battleground. Because that takes you away from actually delivering for your community if you get down to that sort of thing, and I hope I never see that. But councillors, this is something we have to go forward with. It's right at the end of our term. The incoming councillor is going to have to deal with this and get this down pat. But I'd like to see us do that as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hungerford. We'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Babarowski, Councillor Cox, Councillor Natoli, Councillor Johnston, Councillor Dixon, Councillor Hungerford, Councillor Apray, Councillor Suarez, Councillor Law. Sorry, say again.
Not councillor.
Councillor O'Prey, my apologies, sorry. All but Councillor O'Prey. And thank you, Councillor Law, I've counted you. And let it be shown that the Mayor opposed the motion and so did Councillor O'Prey. The motion's carried. Thank you. Thanks very much, Megan. Let's move now to item 9. There are no notices of motion. Fantastic result. But there are 2 petitions, and they are from Councillor Johnston, and they appear to be around a similar matter, but we'll let Councillor Johnston explain 10.1 and 10.2. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. There's quite a bit of angst in the Old Orchard Estate at Palmwoods in relation to this development application. There's 2 petitions, one which is signed by 224 opposing and one by 217 who are suggesting alternatives. The lead petitioner is Laurelie Sweeney. So the subject is community petition against the proposed development of 55A Old Orchard Drive, application number RAL 23/0085 and operational works 23/0416. As the lead petitioner, I represent the concerned group of residents in Palmwoods. We wish to formally submit this petition against the proposed development. This petition has been signed by a total of 224 residents opposing, and the second petition, which is supporting this one, the 217 advocating alternative suggestions. The reason for opposition relates to environmental impact. The development threatens local biodiversity, including habitats for protected species like koalas and bats. Biodiversity loss, the removal of mature trees and the alteration of natural landscapes will disrupt the ecological balance. 3, community character, the increase in residential density and traffic will significantly change the character of our tranquil neighbourhood. And 4, public spaces, the proposed plan will diminish the green space cherished by our community. The alternative suggestions.
Can we we'll receive that one first. Someone second, please. Councillor Dixon's happy to second. All those in favour of receipt? That's carried unanimously. Okay, great. Now we'll go to 10.2.
It relates to the same development. And the undersigned residents are concerned community members and submit united in opposing the proposed development into 10 single lots. And their reasons, their alternative suggestions is that it should be a community park, transfer the area into the community park with open greens fields, walking paths and picnic areas, community garden, it could establish a community garden, community events venue, could be developed for community events, farmers markets, cultural gatherings, green corridor, it could create a green corridor for lineal park with walking and cycling, educational space to develop an educational green space with interpretive signs, botanic garden and outdoor classrooms for the learning of environment and ecological matters, biodiversity reserve, foster biodiversity by preserving and enhancing the existing vegetation. Community orchard could be planted with trees, nuts, creating community orchard, habitat for pollinators, design the area to support pollinators such as bees and butterflies by planting wildflowers and native plants, and a fitness and wellness hub. Develop the green space into a fitness and wellness hub with outdoor exercise stations, yoga, walking trails, etc. These alternative uses not only enhance the community quality of life but also contribute to the environmental sustainability. It should be noted that this is not council land, this is privately owned land.
Okay, again, moved by Councillor Johnson, seconded by Councillor Dixon. All those in favour of receipt? That's carried unanimously. Yep. Councillors, that brings us to the end of this, our penultimate meeting, as I said earlier. Thank you very much for your contribution, and our final meeting for this quadrennial term will be on the 7th of March. So I look forward to wrapping up the term on that date. So thanks very much, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day.